The security guard had his hand up before the man had taken 3 steps into the corridor. Nobody in the Hargrove Tower boardroom was supposed to be here. Not through that door, not in that corridor, not wearing what this man was wearing, which was a gray work jacket with Reed's Auto stitched over the chest pocket in thread that had faded from black to the color of old charcoal. He was not carrying a briefcase. He was not wearing a lanyard. He had not been announced by the front desk, because the front desk had not seen him come in. He had come in through the service entrance, which he knew how to use because he had used service entrances his entire working life, and which the security architecture of a 40-story building had not considered a meaningful vector, because men who came through service entrances did not go to boardrooms. This one did. The guard stepped in front of him. The man did not stop moving, but he slowed. He looked at the guard the way a man looks at an obstacle that is not a threat, with patience, not with alarm. "I need to put something on that table," he said. His voice was even, unhurried. The voice of someone who had said difficult things in difficult circumstances before, and had learned that urgency was rarely your friend. "Sir, this floor is restricted access." "I know." He reached into the breast pocket of the jacket and produced a folded piece of paper. Not a business card, not a security badge. A folded piece of paper. 1 page. 30 seconds. "Then I'll go back the way I came, Dot." Inside the boardroom, through the glass panel beside the door, 8 people sat around a long table. At the near end, a woman in a dark blazer was looking at a document. Another man, compact, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had been waiting for this particular moment for a long time, had slid across the surface toward her. Her face was composed with the specific, effortful composure of someone who has made a private decision not to let anything show. Her hands were flat on the table. The door was not fully closed. In the gap, the woman saw the guard. She saw the man in the gray jacket. She saw the folded piece of paper. Something moved through her face, not alarm, but recognition, as if something she had been waiting for had arrived in the form she least expected, but somehow should have anticipated. The board chair, Eleanor Voss, 68 years old, and one of the founding members of the company that bore the name above every door in this building, was watching the door, too. She had been watching it since the meeting began, in the particular way of someone who knows something is coming and is simply waiting for the timing to resolve itself. She looked at the guard, she said quietly, and with the finality of someone who did not repeat themselves. "Let him in." The guard stepped aside. The man in the gray jacket walked to the table. He placed the folded piece of paper in front of the silver-haired man at the far end. The man who had been doing the most talking for the past 47 minutes. The man whose name was Ray Ace, and who had arrived at this meeting with what he believed was an unassailable position. Reyes looked at the paper. His face performed a sequence of things that his professional training had not prepared him for. He looked up at the man in the jacket, then at the woman in the dark blazer, then back at the paper. Eleanor Voss rose to her feet. "Meeting adjourned," she said. That was how it ended. This is how it began. The wipers had failed at 8:43 in the evening, which Daniel Reed noted because he was a man who noted time the way he noted mechanical sounds, as information, as data, as the thing that would later tell you how bad the problem had gotten before you understood it was a problem. The snow on Route 9 heading up towards Summit Pass was the kind that didn't negotiate. It came down with the flat, purposeful density of weather that had made up its mind, and the visibility had gone from poor to nothing in approximately the time it took to acknowledge that the wipers were no longer doing anything useful. The engine died at 8:51. Not dramatically, not with a shudder or a bang, just the quiet, conclusive cessation of a machine that had done what it could and had reached its limit. Daniel sat for 4 seconds. He had learned, in years of building things and fixing things and keeping things running past their reasonable life expectancy, that 4 seconds of stillness before you acted was almost always worth more than immediate reaction. He thought about Emma. His daughter, 7 years old, was 38 miles away in the house on Granger Street, currently in the care of Ruth Halverson, his neighbor, and the closest thing the family had to a grandmother. Emma would be asleep by now, or near it. She was not afraid of storms. She was afraid of the morning after a storm, specifically of the possibility that her father would not be where she expected him to be, because she had learned at 4 years old, the year her mother left, that adults who were supposed to be somewhere sometimes were not. He sent the text first, "Daddy's okay. Don't wait up." He didn't know if the bar of signal was enough to carry it. He sent it anyway. Then he pulled up the Maps application. The pin appeared. Half a mile. Summit Ridge Lodge. He had passed the turnoff 20 minutes ago without registering it. He zipped his jacket, pulled his cap down over his ears, and stepped into weather that hit him with the full impersonal force of something that was not trying to hurt him and would hurt him anyway if he let it. The half mile took 22 minutes. He counted his steps at intervals as a discipline because counting meant attending and attending meant not panicking, and not panicking was the only useful position available to him. By the time the lights of the lodge appeared through the trees, his fingers had gone from cold to numb, and he had accepted this as a temporary condition that would resolve when he was indoors, and as an ongoing condition if he didn't get indoors soon. He pushed through the heavy front door. The warmth was a physical event. Cedar and wood smoke and something faintly warm behind them, cinnamon, or something adjacent to it. He stood for 1 full second and breathed. The lodge lobby was modest and honest. Dark timber, stone fireplace with an actual fire in it, leather chairs, a mounted elk. Reception desk at the far wall, a young woman behind it, already tracking him with the particular expression of someone who was about to deliver news they hadn't asked to deliver. But before he reached the desk, something caught his attention near the window. A woman in a wheelchair, not parked casually, positioned with intentionality, slightly away from the direct firelight, turned toward the window. Dark hair, charcoal blazer over silk, the blazer wrong for a snowstorm in both fabric and thermal capacity. A phone in her lap she wasn't looking at. A leather briefcase against the wheel of the chair. She had the stillness of someone who was working very hard to hold something in. Daniel got to the desk. The young woman, whose name tag read Claire, gave him the look he had braced for. Every room was taken. The storm had driven people off the mountain for 2 hours. The only available space was the Summit Suite. 2 private bedrooms, shared living area, and another guest had already been waiting on it for 40 minutes. A voice from behind him said, "Then we have a problem." He turned. The woman from near the window had rolled up behind him. Up close, she was younger than he'd first read her, mid-30s, with the kind of exhaustion in her face that sleep alone couldn't fix. Dark eyes, sharp, aimed at Claire, with the cool attention of someone who was very used to being the person in the room whose requirements were addressed first. "I need that suite," she said to Claire. Not to Daniel. He appreciated the efficiency of that. What followed was brief and practical. The lodge policy during emergency closures. The suite could be shared between stranded guests when no single rooms were available. Neither party could be given preference. Claire delivered this with the pained delivery of someone who has memorized a policy and is not happy to be implementing it. Daniel looked at the woman in the wheelchair. She looked at him. Neither of them looked particularly pleased. "The suite has 2 bedrooms, Daniel said to Claire. "Yes, 2 private bedrooms, shared living space and kitchen. He looked at the woman again. "Fine," he said. She looked at him. "Fine," she said. Then to Claire, key us in. Her name, he learned, was Adriana Vale. She told him this, in the elevator without preamble, in the manner of someone who has decided that the efficient handling of logistics is better than the social performance of privacy. He told her his name. She acknowledged it with a nod. The elevator opened on the 3rd floor. The suite was larger than Daniel's entire ground floor. Stone fireplace already lit. Floor-to-ceiling windows, showing nothing but dark and luminous white. 2 bedroom doors on opposite sides of the living space. A kitchen along one wall, with a coffee machine that had more settings than his truck dashboard. Adriana went immediately to the window to check her phone signal. Daniel pulled his own phone out. The text to Emma showed delivered. He let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. They negotiated the practical details without discussion. She needed quiet between 10 and midnight for calls. He took the bedroom by the window. She needed the outlet access. Fine. Room service produced beef stew and rolls. They ate at the small table because the coffee table was too low for her chair, and he had figured this out before she needed to say anything and had simply set the food at the table and said nothing about having figured it out. She noticed that. He saw her notice. Her calls were at 10 and midnight. He went to his room. He lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, listening to the storm work against the glass, thinking about Emma and the text he'd sent and whether the bar of signal had been enough. He was asleep faster than he expected. He woke up at 2:47 to the sound of a voice from the other side of the suite. He had heard a great many kinds of crying in his life. There was the crying of children who were hurt, which was immediate and loud and wanted answering right away. There was the crying of children who were afraid, which was quieter and needed steadiness. There was the crying of his late wife in the last months, which had been a sound he had learned to sit beside without trying to make it stop, because sometimes the right response to grief was not resolution but company. What he heard from the other side of the wall was something else, the controlled, compressed sound of someone trying to keep something inside that had gotten too large to stay there. The specific sound of someone who had decided long ago that they did not cry where anyone could hear and was discovering at 2:47 in the morning that the decision required more of them than they had available. He got up. He stood in the hallway for a moment, working through whether to stay or go, because a person was entitled to their private moments. He had earned enough of his own to understand their value. But there was something in the sound that moved his feet before his mind had finished deciding. The living room was lit only by the dying firelight and the faint blue glow of her laptop on the counter. She was in her chair near the window, her back to him. Her hand was over her face. Daniel stopped just inside the room. He did not speak. He did not move. He stood there so she would know she wasn't alone without making her feel observed. After a few seconds, her hand came down. She turned her head slightly, not enough to look at him directly, but enough to register his presence. "The call didn't go well," she said. Not a question. He walked to the kitchen, checked the coffee carafe, started a fresh pot. "No," he said. She exhaled, slow, controlled. Reyes came in with 2 items we hadn't seen before, items that weren't in any previous communication. Her voice was steady in the way of someone who has trained the tremor out of it through long practice. Either someone on my team leaked, or they had this prepared for weeks and were waiting. "Which do you think?" She turned her chair slightly. In the low light, her face looked different, the professional layer entirely gone, scraped off by whatever had happened on that call. What was underneath it was younger and more tired and more real. "Both," she said, "which means someone on my team is working with Reyes." He brought her coffee and sat in the leather chair across from her. The fire had burned to coals. Outside, the storm was starting to slow. "He told me," she said, "to consider a restructuring of executive leadership." She wrapped both hands around the cup, which is the corporate language for step down. "Is he right?" She looked up sharply. Then the sharp edge eased, and underneath it was something that was trying to be honest and had not found the path yet. She looked at the window. "I built that company when I was 26 years old. I had a business plan and $40,000 I had borrowed from 3 different people. I built it into something that employs 4,000 people in 11 countries." She said it quietly, each word placed. "And I have given it everything." She stopped. "Instead of what?" Daniel asked. She turned the cup in her hands. "Instead of figuring out who I am when I'm not the CEO," she said. The room was very quiet. The storm outside had settled to the soft, steady fall of something that had spent itself out. Daniel said, "I know that shape, not the same situation, but the shape of it." He held his coffee with both hands, elbows on his knees. "When my wife left, she left when Emma was 3. My first thought wasn't about Emma. I'm not proud of that. My first thought was about the shop, because the shop was connected to everything that had gone wrong, and my instinct was to fix the shop, to fix the marriage. And she was already gone before I understood that the marriage wasn't what needed solving." He paused. Adriana looked at him, very still. "I had made myself into a collection of functions," he said. "Provider, mechanic, husband, father. I had all the roles and I filled them, and somewhere along the way the roles stopped being things I did and started being things I was. And when one of them was taken away," he shook his head, "I didn't know what was under it." "What was under it?" she asked. He half smiled, honest, not performed, still figuring that out honestly. "Emma helps. She doesn't care about any of the roles. She just cares about the dad who shows up." Adriana looked at the fire coals. Something in her face had gone very still in a way that wasn't closed off. The stillness of someone who has heard something and needs a moment to let it settle. "I don't have that," she said. Not with self-pity. Just as a fact stated plainly, the way she stated most things. "I don't have a person who wants the version of me that isn't the CEO. You might, Daniel said. You might just not have given anyone the chance to see that version. She looked at him. That sounds like something from a motivational poster. Maybe. He didn't flinch. Doesn't make it wrong. She held his gaze for a moment. Then, slowly and involuntarily, something happened around her eyes before she could stop it. Not quite a smile, but something in the vicinity of one. A thing that arrived before she had decided to allow it. You're very direct, she said. I'm a mechanic, he said. If I'm not direct about what's broken, the car doesn't get fixed. I'm not a car. No, he said. You're considerably more complicated and considerably more expensive. He said it perfectly straight. She looked at him for half a second, and then she laughed. Brief and surprised and genuine, and he could tell by the expression on her face that she hadn't planned for it to happen. It changed her face completely. Outside, the storm had quieted to a whisper. The coals glowed. They talked until 4 a.m. He told her about Emma, about the way his daughter had invented what she called the right now rule, the 5-year-old logic that you could only be sad about right now, not about things that might happen later. About the morning after a thunderstorm when Emma had said, "There's no point being scared of the next thunder if the one you just heard didn't hurt you." Adriana listened with the full attention she had given everything that had mattered to her, the same attention she gave contracts and board presentations and acquisition proposals, except that this time the attention had nowhere strategic to go. It simply landed. She asked him how he had kept going after Emma's mother left, when Emma was 4 and he was doing it entirely alone. He told her about the list, the daily list, just the day, not the week, not the month. Get Emma to Ruth's. Open the garage. Order the brake pads. Make dinner. Pick Emma up. Just what was in front of him. It's not the same as healing, he said, but it keeps you moving until the healing catches up. She was quiet. He could see her applying it to something he couldn't see. At some point before 5, she said, I think I'm afraid that if I step out of the role, I'll find there's nothing there. That I'll step back and find out I'm just... She stopped. Empty, he said. A long pause. You're not empty, he said. Empty people don't feel what you've been feeling tonight. Her door closed at 5:12. He washed the coffee cups, turned off the kitchen light, and went back to his room. He lay in the dark and listened to the silence where the storm had been, thinking about a woman who had built something extraordinary and was terrified that the extraordinary thing was the only extraordinary thing about her. He thought about how rare it was. 2 strangers, stripped of all the normal protective distance, having told each other the truth for 3 hours. He was still thinking about it when he fell asleep. Morning came with flat, pale mountain light. The storm was over. The mountain was still. He woke at 6:30 to the sound of her voice through the wall. A different call now, warmer register, someone she trusted. He poured coffee and gave her the room. When she came out, her hair was back up, blazer buttoned, face composed. The CEO had returned. He could see the seams where she had reassembled it. She told him her attorney was working on a response to Reyes. Her CFO thought they had leverage. She said it crisply, efficiently, and he understood that the night they had spent was filed somewhere that was not this register. But then she sat across from him at the table, with the breakfast he had brought up, without being asked, fruit included, because she looked like someone who had been running on espresso and spreadsheets for 2 days, and the filing began to show its edges. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said, about the roles stopping being things you do and starting being things you are. He waited. I think I became the CEO at 26 and understood it as a temporary state, she said. Something I was doing until the company was stable, and then I would expand, become other things too. She traced the edge of her notepad, but the company kept needing things, and I kept giving them. And by the time I looked up, the temporary state was 10 years old, and I couldn't find the other things anywhere. His phone buzzed. A voice message from Emma. He looked at Adriana. She nodded. Emma's voice came through small and complete and already at full velocity. Daddy, Ruth made oatmeal again. You know I don't like the kind with the brown stuff on top. Also, I have something to show you. It's a drawing, it's important. Okay, bye. Also, the heat came on funny last night. Ruth said it's probably fine. Is it probably fine? Okay, bye, for real. His whole face changed when he heard it. Not dramatically, just the specific loosening around the eyes and jaw that happens when a person receives a signal from the center of their life. Adriana said, she's okay? She's fine. He was already typing back. Home before lunch. Don't eat the brown stuff if you don't want it. Save the drawing. Love you. He put the phone in his pocket. Adriana was looking at the space where the voice had been. She drew you, Adriana said quietly. She draws everything. He picked up his coffee. Last week she drew a portrait of me that had my eyes in approximately the right region of my face. That's generous. That's how she draws everyone she loves. The important features are approximately right. The rest is wherever they fit. Adriana was quiet. And he saw in her face the expression he had seen when she laughed at 3 in the morning, the thing that arrived before she could manage it. But this one was slower and heavier and had something adjacent to grief in it. The expression of a person standing at the edge of something they want and finding the distance larger than they expected. What's the drawing going to be? She asked. Probably the storm. Probably with me in it. She'll make me very large and dramatic, and the storm will be enormous, but I'll be bigger. He paused. She has a sense of scale that prioritizes what matters emotionally over what's accurate physically. Adriana said, she sounds extraordinary. She is, he said. And then, she came that way. I just tried not to break it. The tow truck was on the mountain by 8. He had time. I want to say something before I go, he said. She looked at him. When you get back to the city, whatever you decide about Reyes, make sure it's your decision, not a response to pressure, not a capitulation because the hour is wrong and the situation is difficult. He held her gaze. You built something that works. That means you get to decide what your role in it looks like going forward, not him. She was quiet. Something moved through her face, layered, complicated. You sound like you've had this conversation before, she said. With myself, he said. About what it means to be the person in charge versus the person everything runs through. Very quietly, she said, I know the difference. I just forgot for a while. Yeah, he said. So did I. He opened the door. She said his name. He turned. She was looking at him with something open in her expression, open and direct, stripped of every layer of armor for just that 1 second. Thank you, she said, for seeing me. He stood in the doorway for 1 extra second. I did, he said. Then he walked out, and the door closed between them, and the hallway was quiet and white and ordinary. 48 miles away, Reyes was preparing his next move. The call had not gone the way he intended. Adriana Vale had refused his restructuring request with the quiet, documented precision of a woman who had spent 3 hours at 2 in the morning deciding what she believed and had made her decision before the sun came up. Reyes had backed down. Partially, temporarily, the way a man backs down who has not yet played all his cards. The card he had not yet played was Vincent Carr. Carr was 44 years old, Yale-educated, polished, the man Adriana had brought up through the ranks of her own company and trusted with the financial architecture of the merger. He was also, for the past 8 months, in communication with Reyes through a private email chain that had never touched a company server. He believed it had never touched a company server. He had underestimated one thing, that every time he accessed his personal email from the Vale Industries network, which he had done 17 times in 90 days, from his company laptop using the office Wi-Fi, the access log had been recorded, not reviewed. Just recorded, sitting in a server the IT department managed and checked when something flagged. Adriana didn't know this yet. She knew she had a leak. She knew Reyes had information he shouldn't have. She didn't know the source or the mechanism. She called Daniel 6 days after the storm, from a glass-walled conference room in the Vale Industries building, with the merger timeline spiraling and Reyes's second pressure campaign beginning. She told him what she knew. She told him what she didn't know. He asked, did Carr ever access his personal accounts from company equipment? She called IT from the other phone. The answer came back in 40 minutes, yes. 17 instances. All documented, all time-stamped. The timestamps matched every instance in which Reyes had arrived to a negotiation with information he could only have had from inside. She sat with this for a moment. Then she called her attorney. Then she assembled the evidence package, the server logs, the timestamps, the corresponding Reyes communications, each piece matched and annotated. It was thorough and methodical, and it was exactly the kind of work she had spent 20 years learning to do. It was also, if presented correctly, the kind of evidence that closed arguments rather than opened them. She called Daniel again. She said, I have what I need, he said, then use it. The board meeting is the day after tomorrow. I know. A pause. She said, "You could," and then stopped. "I'll be there," he said. He hadn't been asked. He was going anyway, the way a person goes toward a thing they have decided matters, without requiring an invitation. He drove 4 hours from Pinewood in the shop truck, arrived 20 minutes before the meeting, and went through the service entrance, because that was the fastest way in, and he had been using service entrances his entire working life. The boardroom was on the 42nd floor. The security guard at the corridor was doing his job, and Daniel respected that, and also he was going in regardless, and the folded piece of paper in his breast pocket was the entire reason. Eleanor Voss let him in because Eleanor Voss had seen the evidence package the night before and had spent 12 hours deciding what she thought about what was inside it. And when a man in a mechanic's jacket appeared at the boardroom door with the evidence confirmation she had been waiting for, she recognized the moment for what it was. He placed the technical summary in front of Reyes. The summary showed, in plain language that any non-technical board member could follow, the exact mechanism by which 17 confidential documents had traveled from Vail Industries servers to Vincent Carr's personal email and from there to a third party. It showed the dates. It showed the document names. It showed the routing. Reyes looked at it. He looked at the man who had put it there. Vincent Carr, seated 3 chairs down, saw what was on the paper and understood what it meant. He stood up and did not finish the sentence he began. Eleanor Voss rose. She was 68 years old, and she had been building this company since before Reyes had known what a board of directors was. She said 2 words. Meeting adjourned. The vote was 9-3. Reyes and Carr left the building with the company's legal team behind them. Outside, a small cluster of financial press who had been tipped off about a major leadership announcement got one, just not the one they'd been told to expect. Daniel did not stay for the aftermath. He found Adriana in the corridor outside the boardroom, in the specific stillness of someone who has just fought a very long battle and has not yet understood that it is over. He said nothing for a moment. He simply stood near her, the way he had stood near her at 2 a.m. in a mountain lodge, close enough to be present, far enough to give her room. "It's done," she said. "Yeah," he said. She exhaled. Slow, very long, the specific exhale of months of compression releasing at once. She was still in her work clothes, still in the professional register, and underneath it was the person from the lodge, the one who laughed at 3 a.m. and talked about what was under the rolls. "You drove 4 hours," she said. 4 and change. "I didn't ask you to come." "No," he said. "You didn't." She looked at him. Something moved through her face that she did not bother managing. Not quite gratitude, not quite something else. A combination that didn't have a name, which was fine because not everything needed one. When he got home, Emma was at the kitchen table with a drawing she had been working on for 3 days. She ran to him and hit him at full velocity, which at 7 years old was enough to push him back a step. He caught her and held on. "You look different," she announced when she pulled back, with the clinical assessment of a child who monitored the people she loved for changes. Good different or bad different? She considered. Just different. She grabbed his hand and pulled him to the table. "Look." The drawing was on 3 pieces of paper taped together to make it large enough. On the left side, a man in the snow, very large, impossibly large, larger than the trees and the storm around him. On the right side, farther away but distinct, a figure in a wheelchair, small but upright, with something underneath them that might have been mountains, or might have been the outline of something resolving. Between them, a gap. Not bridged, not closed, but not infinite either. "Who is she?" Emma asked. She was pointing at the wheelchair figure. "Someone I met in a storm," Daniel said. Emma looked at the figure. "She looks like she's figuring something out." "She is," he said. "She's very good at it." Emma accepted this. "Can she come for Sunday tamales?" He looked at his daughter. She looked back at him with the clear, unworried eyes of someone who has identified the right question and asked it without ceremony. 3 weeks later, Adriana Vail drove 4 hours from the city to Pinewood without telling him she was coming, because she had learned that telling him she was coming gave her the option of talking herself out of it on the way, and she did not want the option. She parked in the small lot outside Reed's Auto at 11:15 on a Sunday morning. Through the bay door, she could see Daniel under the hood of a pickup, and through the office window she could see a small person sitting at a desk with what appeared to be a significant art project in progress. She sat in her car for a moment. She reached into the passenger seat and picked up the baseball cap that had been sitting there for 3 weeks. She had bought it in a gas station on the way to the city the day after the board meeting, not knowing why, and it had sat on the passenger seat since then, which she had not analyzed. It was plain navy blue. It said nothing on the front. She got out of the car. Daniel saw her when she came through the bay door. He straightened. He looked at her, and then at the car, and then back at her. 4.5 hours, he said. 4 hours and 22 minutes, she said. The traffic on 94 was better than expected. He wiped his hands on a shop rag. He said nothing else. He didn't need to. Emma appeared in the office doorway. She looked at Adriana. Then she looked at her father. Then she looked back at Adriana with the slow, calibrating attention she brought to everything that seemed important. "Are you the person from the storm?" she asked. "I am," Adriana said. Emma seemed satisfied by this in a way that required no elaboration. She had decided something before she asked the question, and the answer had confirmed it. "The tamales are almost done," she said. "Ruth made the sauce. Dad burns the sauce." She looked at Adriana with the frank, evaluating gaze of someone offering important logistical information. "You can sit in the office. The chair is pretty good." Adriana looked at Daniel. He looked at her. He reached up to the hook beside the office door and lifted down the shop cap. "Reed's Auto," the same faded lettering as his jacket. He held it out to her, not as a gesture, not as a moment, just the next practical thing, offered plainly, the way he offered most things. She took it. She put it on. It was too big. It sat low on her forehead, and she adjusted it, and it still wasn't quite right, and she didn't fix it again. Emma looked at her. She nodded with the authority of someone whose judgment on this subject was not tentative. "Now you look like you're from Pinewood," she said. Adriana looked at Daniel. He looked back at her. Outside the bay door, the November air was cold and clean and completely ordinary, which was, she was learning, exactly what she had needed. "Sunday," she said. "Sunday," he agreed. And they went inside.